You to take out a sheet of notebook paper for some notes today, or you could put them on your Google Drive. Doesn't bother me. Research does suggest that pencil to paper increases our level of comprehension. Today is our last research method that we're going to focus on. So we got 5 so far with 4 descriptive research method and the experimental research method from yesterday. Today, the correlation research method. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that that's all that's out there, that there's only 6. There's quite a few more. But these are the ones that we're going to focus on, widely used in psychology. Now, with the correlation research method, you see it quite often. I see it all the time in educational research. We talk about different teaching methods that are effective inside the classroom. There's research talking about intelligence and the relationship between what you do and leading to your intellect, and a lot of correlation research with that particular content there. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Why don't I think about a scenario to start off with, okay? I'm a researcher, and I'm interested in doing a study on alcohol consumption and its effect on student performance inside the classroom, okay? Inside the high school classroom. Got to make sure that I emphasize that, okay? So the ideal experiment that would help me to get to my results that I'm looking for would be I would teach particular content. I would have 2 groups. My control group, I would just do the normal thing that I always do. With my experimental group, what I would do is I would have them consume alcohol, drink, expose them to that particular variable, but then go ahead and teach. And then at the end of the week, I would go ahead and give them an assessment, and then I would compare, right? My experimental group with my control group there. Okay, and see if the consumption of alcohol had effect on their assessments, their test scores. Right? What's wrong with that? Does anybody see anything wrong with that? What's wrong with it, Mr. Singletary?
Alcohol to minors.
I would be giving alcohol to minors, and that is illegal. Correct? Right? So I can't violate the law in that way just because I'm for the good of science. Does that mean that it's justifiable? No. You gotta be a person of integrity whenever you're doing research, right? So I'm still interested in doing this study, right? It's not like this is the awful research that you just can't do, that you gotta stay away from as a researcher. How am I gonna figure this stuff out? I want to know the effects of alcohol consumption on high school students. So what are my options? Does anybody have any ideas? Seth, you got an idea?
You could try it on students that are over 21 in college.
Okay, that's a very good suggestion, right? And I could do that, but then my research would just focus on college students, right? And as a student of psychology, I know that there's a big physiological difference between the brain of a high school student and the brain of a college student. I'm more interested in its effect on the high school brain rather than the college age brain. Miss Eddie?
Could you maybe, instead of alcohol, offer a placebo so that it's
Right, like yesterday's study that we had, right? With the textbook example. So use tonic then instead, okay? That would be a decent idea as well. However, what I would be measuring there is students' expectations of receiving alcohol versus the actual alcohol, right? Which would be a good study, right? I'm not saying that's not, but I'm looking for the actual substance then. That's a good idea, though. Other suggestions? Dad, looks like you're thinking.
Well, so are we measuring like the influence of like alcohol in their brains, or just like in general
Their test scores is essentially what I'm looking for at the end. That's how I'm going to measure it.
like through alcohol?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know, like, what I was just thinking about, like, does it have to be alcohol? Like, it could be, like, you could measure other things that could, like, impede test scores, like, you could control, like, the amount of sleep that they have, or, or like, other stuff.
All right, that's true. That's good, and that would be good studies, right? Very applicable. However, I'm interested in alcohol specifically. Yeah. Yes, Mr. Charles.
Couldn't you go to like a different country where like they're like don't have to be as old to drink alcohol?
Right. So the change of a cultural environment where the laws are different, right, and it makes it more accessible, right? Now in that particular case, I happen to be doing a study on a different group of students, right, in a different cultural environment, and I'm more concerned about the American high school student in this particular case. So that's a very good suggestion, though, as well, right? All right, so it's a challenge, right? Now the question is, are there high school students that have consumed alcohol over the course of the school week? Yeah, there are. Okay. Is there any way that I could get a group of students to participate in research and collect data over a long period of time where they have admitted that they consumed alcohol, and I can look at their test scores versus students that have not drank alcohol, and I can look at their test scores, right? And I could probably get an idea of how much of an effect alcohol has had on their test scores, correct? Right? And so I could probably see that there's a relationship. What relationship do you think that I would find? Do you think alcohol is going to increase test scores or decrease test scores? Probably decrease test scores, okay? So hopefully through my research, what I can do is I can create this mathematical equation that gives me a strength of that relationship. How strong is that relationship, okay? And essentially what I'm doing there is following this idea of the correlation research method, okay? Now, at the conclusion of my research, can I say that alcohol consumption causes decreased performance inside the classroom? Can I say that? Can I use that terminology? I can't. I can't use that terminology because what? I haven't performed a what? What is the only research method that can identify a cause and effect relationship? An experiment. So since I haven't used an experiment, I can't say alcohol causes decreased performance in the classroom, but I could say there's a relationship between the two of them, right? One may possibly perhaps lead to decreased performance, but I can't use the terminology of cause, okay? That way. So I'll give you another example. Tobacco consumption, right? Smoking. You know, we think about our culture today and what we know about smoking, the consequences of tobacco consumption. How can tobacco companies continue to get away with what they're doing? Right? With selling, producing cigarettes and other tobacco products and selling them, when we know that there are all these harmful consequences associated with it, okay? Well, the reason why is because we can never say one causes another. Has everybody got that? Right? You can't say as a researcher, all right, let's get down to it, let's do an experiment. I'm going to bring in a group of people, and I'm going to say, hey, smoke, 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 right? Let's see what happens to you, right? Can you ethically do that? No, you cannot, right? So you can't perform an experiment, but you can only say that, hey, there's a strong relationship between smoking and the development of cancer, okay? So tobacco companies can use that and say, hey, you can't say cause, right? And so we can continue, or they can continue to produce their particular products that way, okay? So when you hear the word correlation, what is it? What I want you to think of is the word relationship. Sound good? Use those two words interchangeably. Correlation and relationship. Right? It's a relationship between two variables. That's what a correlation is. A relationship between two variables. Correlation versus causation. We'll look at this at the beginning of the class tomorrow. I'll give you some examples where a lot of times, sometimes we think of it as causation, but the reality is it's just correlation. It comes off the results of the research, comes off as its causation, but the reality is just there's a relationship between the two, not necessarily a cause, okay? I want to give you one other example in which, correlation research is applicable. Birth defects and consumption of tobacco products or alcohol, right? If a researcher's interested in that, you can't, bring in a group of pregnant women and say, hey, I want you to consume alcohol. Let's see what happens, right? You can't do that. But are there women that have consumed alcohol during pregnancy? There are, all right? And then you can look at the results, and you can say that there's a relationship between alcohol consumption and birth defects, okay? So, I said there's kind of like a mathematical equation associated with it. Now, we're not going to break it down into the mathematical component of the correlation research method. You take a psych methods class in college, they'll probably dig deeper into it. Or you could probably talk to Ms. Willis, she's an expert on this stuff. But what we're looking at with a correlation, we need to be familiar with, there's a number involved, and it's called the correlation coefficient, okay? So how do you measure the strength of a correlation? It's based upon a scale, okay? And this is what the scale looks like. It goes from -1 over here, all the way to +1 over here. And students, when they look at it initially, they automatically jump to the conclusion that if you're over here towards the positive number, that means the stronger the relationships that you have between two variables, but it's actually false, okay? There's two areas of the scale which you can have really strong correlations. It's the ends of the scale, okay? The closer you get to the edge, the stronger the relationship between the variables that you're looking at, okay? The closer that you get to the middle, to the 0, the weaker the relationship you have between those two variables, okay? So if I'm a researcher and I really want to find something that has a lot of strength to it, maybe my mindset is, hopefully I find a correlation that has a high number, right? Whether it's like a 0.98 or a -0.98, I mean, that's fairly impressive finding there, okay? If you happen to come up with that, it's very close to causation, okay? Now, you will never see a perfect 1 or a perfect -1 because that would imply causation. Sound good? You won't find a perfect 1 or a perfect -1, okay? This 0 in the middle, it's got another name for it. It means spurious correlation. You may write that out to the side of the 0. Spurious correlation. What a spurious correlation is, it means that there is no relationship at all, but some people are, misconstrued as thinking that there is a relationship between those two variables, okay? I'll give you an example. This one's a little bit eye-opening, disturbing, but there's a relationship or a spurious correlation between ice cream sales and rape cases, okay? And so as a researcher or as somebody in society, if you come across and you see that this idea that the more ice cream that is sold, the more rape victims, the more rape cases take place, what should we do as a society? We should stop doing what? We should stop selling ice cream, right? Because when ice cream sales goes down, rape cases go down. Everybody got that? So that's a spurious correlation, though. There's a third variable involved that would affect both of these, ice cream sales and rape cases. Anybody know what the third variable would be? Yep, it's one. Yes, season and temperature. Yep, temperature is what it is. Okay? When the temperature goes up, people buy ice cream. Okay? More so. Also, people go outside, right? And it gives these deviant individuals more opportunities to commit their deviant acts. When the temperature goes down, we don't buy as much ice cream. At the same time, not very many people go outside, decreases the opportunity for that deviant person to do this deviant thing. Sound good? Okay. So, correlation. Which correlation is stronger? Is it -0.84 or 0.64? The answer is -0.84. Okay, even though it's a negative number, it's a stronger correlation because it's closer to the edge of the scale. Okay, easy way to figure this out. You guys know your absolute value bars in math class. You just put them around all your correlations. It doesn't matter whether it's negative or positive, whichever one has the biggest number. That is the stronger correlation. 0.44 or 0, it's 0.44 because it's farther away from 0, it's closer to the edge. 1 or 0.1, it would be 1, but again, you're not going to see a 1 because that would, in effect, communicate the idea of causation. All right, so there's two sides. There's a positive side of the scale and there's a negative side of the scale. So we've got to figure out, what does that mean? You know, why is there a positive side? Why does a variable, or why does a coefficient end up on the positive side versus the negative side? Okay? We're talking about, I want you guys to think about arrows for just a minute. Okay? If the arrows with these variables are heading in the same direction, whether they're up or down, if they're heading in the same direction, that's a positive correlation. Everybody got that? Okay, it's kind of like a negative number times a negative number equals a positive correlation. Sound good? You think about that in math class. So I'll give you some variables to think about, or examples. Price of car versus social status. If you bought this car, what would happen to your social status? Everybody would think that you are cool. Okay, so your social status goes up. You go the opposite direction as well. Again, it's still a positive correlation, but you have a really, really junker of a car, right? I had a junker of a car when I started out. The 88 Delta, we called it the Oldsmobile Cadillac. It would backfire when I brought it into the school parking lot. Everybody would laugh. My social status, not very high. Way down here, okay? But the arrows are still pointing in the same direction, right? So it's still a positive correlation, okay? Stress and disease. The less stress you happen to have, I don't get sick that often. The arrows are pointed in the same direction. That's a positive correlation, okay? More stress that I have, more likely to get ill, right? Same direction, positive correlation, okay? Negative correlations. The arrows are headed in opposite directions. Mileage on a car and the value of the car. Imagine some of you have some high mileage vehicles. I got about 195 on mine right now. 195,000, not 195. Have I got more than 195,000 miles on their car? Nope, I'm beating you guys. It's a game to try to get as many miles on your car as you can. And what happens to the value of my car? Yeah, so that means your cars are worth more than my car right now, right? But if you don't have very many miles on your car, then the value goes up quite a bit, right? So that's why, you know, as soon as you drive your car off the dealership's lot, the value starts to decrease. The number of cigarettes that you smoke, the more that you smoke, then your life expectancy goes down. It decreases, okay? The less cigarettes that you smoke, your longevity increases. The arrows are heading in the opposite direction. Again, that equals a negative correlation. It's kind of like a positive number multiplied by a negative number equals a negative number. Sound good? You can think of it that way as well. All right, we already talked about the spurious correlation. It's a correlation coefficient of 0.0. I may come up with a couple more examples tomorrow on spurious correlations. Can the correlation research method answer cause and effect questions? No, it cannot. It can say that there's a relationship between the two variables, not necessarily a cause and effect relationship. What is the cause of what? I shouldn't use that terminology of cause here, but this is a negative of the correlation research method. Let's go back to stress and illness, right? Is it the stress that leads to the illness, or is it the illness that leads to the stress? Right? So sometimes with the correlation research method, you run into those predicaments. Which is the variable that is initiating the change? Right? And so that can create a challenge. These are some positives or advantages of using the correlation. Finishing up, you're able to collect data without unethical experiments, like what we looked at the beginning of the note-taking session here with alcohol consumption and grades. It's an opportunity to study gender differences between males and females, especially with intelligence. A lot of good stuff there with one's IQ and intellect. And then also there's some cost and time efficiency associated with a correlation rather than going through the whole process of committing yourself to an experiment. Sound good? So there are some advantages here as well. I got a couple other videos posted here. Some freaking novice guys talking about causation versus correlation. I'm not going to share those with you necessarily right now, but you could go look at them on your own if you have an extra amount of time and you're interested in doing that. Does anybody have questions about the correlation research method? We have a few moments. You have your naturalist observation assignment. I'll give you a few moments to check in, talk about that for a second, see where you're at, what needs to be done, delegate some responsibilities.